All right.
Just stick that anywhere.
Stick that in my pocket. All right. We can do that. Yep.
Oh, let me. These have been great.
Those are fun.
I mean, there's some real wisdom in every saying that. So let's see.
All right, so we're good.
You can do your introduction while I'm kind of.
All right, so I'm really glad to be here. I was here about a month ago to just see what Mike had been talking about in the way of this museum. We did meet at somebody's 70th birthday party about a year ago and shared a couple of stories, and he's been after me ever since to come do this. I can tell you that that I resisted it for a long time because there are about 3 or 4 boxes of things that hadn't been opened since I closed them and shipped them home from Vietnam. And I knew that to do this, I better get those boxes open and do some homework. And so what I'll tell you today is what I dug out of those boxes, mostly letters to my wife, and also my parents that were saved, and I went through them, and so here's what I remembered about my year in Vietnam in 1966 and 67. I've got a PowerPoint presentation here, which is the way I usually do things, and we're not going to put that on the screen. I got some of my old slides on the screen, and but let me just start off by going through these.
Yeah, click that X on that. You've got one of these funny little pop-ups.
Oh yeah,
Don't click yes.
where are we? The X.
Yeah, click the X. Here.
Oh.
I don't know why.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. Okay. All right. But yeah, a little bit about me to start with. I was born as a Connecticut Yankee in New London, Connecticut, in September 1942. I grew up on the family dairy farm in Sharon, Connecticut, right in the northwest corner of Connecticut, halfway between, as the crow flies, Albany and Hartford. And that's in the Berkshire Hills, which is one of the favorite places to go for fall colors. And the place to me was an awful lot of milking 72 dairy cows twice a day, and I'm looking forward to what tractor work there was, and that could get me out of the cow barn. But in any case, dairy farm, northwestern Connecticut. Went to Colorado College, and had a good time there. Did some athletics, majored in economics, graduated in 1965 with a degree in economics. And if you don't know it, CC is one of the old land grant colleges that dates back to 1876. And it's being a land grant school, compulsory military curriculum. Had to go to one class a week and one drill a week. First 2 years you were there. Only the guys, not the women. And we all knew Vietnam was coming. So we all said, do we want to get drafted, or do we want to stay in ROTC for 2 more years and get a commission? And that's what a lot of us did. It wasn't very long after we graduated that we went on active duty. I went on active duty in September '65. And first thing that happened, I was commissioned as an intelligence officer, the great oxymoron, Army intelligence, right? And the intelligence service within the Army, and what you had to do was pick one of the combat branches to get trained in before you went to your intelligence training. I chose the infantry. It was going to be in Vietnam. I figured, why not? And so we went to Fort Benning, where I completed the infantry officer's basic course. You all probably know more than I do about it, but that was that. On to Fort Holabird for the military intelligence officers orientation course. That was a big survey course in order of battle information structuring, enemy organization capabilities, interrogation techniques, and target acquisition and strategic analysis. They sent us all to Fort Bragg, and they made me into a company commander for a rotational base unit there, which is what they called all the morning report outfits that were just keeping track of people waiting to go to Vietnam in those days. I was there for 3 months helping other people go to Vietnam, and my turn came up, and in September of '66, I got a port call to Travis Air Force Base to go to Vietnam. Many of the guys I trained with were on the same orders and on the same flight, and it turned out that we were all order of battle analysts. My MOS was a 9300, and that basically said that we all expected to be probably brigade or possibly battalion level S2s, staff S2s, and we all expected to be attached to a combat unit in the field somewhere and that type of thing. We landed at Tonsonet Air Base very early in the morning, about 7 o'clock in the morning, and they formed us up after we got off the plane. We'd been on the plane for 24 hours, hopped through Japan, then the Philippines, then Saigon, and they changed our orders right there, and they assigned the whole plane load of us to MACV Headquarters. The next several weeks were kind of nuts as we processed in. We changed quarters about 3 times, and we finally started doing our duty at the Combined Intelligence Center. Initially, it was all located at Tonsonet Air Base in northwest Saigon, and it was in about 4 or 5 different buildings scattered all over the place. I got assigned, well, first let me talk about some of these slides we've got here. Can we? So here's the power. Is it on? It's not on there. There we go. No? There it is. Okay. So here we are coming into Vietnam. I've only got a few slides. I actually didn't find much to go on besides the letters. I got a few things here to support what we're doing, but let me just show you quickly. If this is a big map of Saigon, right here, this area that my hand is over, and I've got a slide of it, we'll look at it a little more closely, is where Tonsonet Air Base is.
When was that dated?
Well, I can tell you it was dated before 1966 because it was a Vietnamese map that I bought. But in any case, that's that. And this slide is of that sandy beach, I believe, is the Vung Tau area. And here we are coming into Vietnam. There's a little bit of a street scene in Saigon. It was always more 2-wheeled and 3-wheeled vehicles than it was 4-wheeled vehicles. And it was always teeming with activity. And we'll talk more about that later, but this is the first BOQ we were in, and I'll show you where this picture's taken of. But there's some kind of a caravan of probably rice coming in from outside of Saigon, And this is very close to Tonsonet Air Base. And it happened to be called Grenade Alley for obvious reasons. And we never saw any action there, but it was famous for that. And then we get to this map that I said. And if you look in the upper left-hand, that's a little bit off here, but you see the arrow right on top there? That's the main gate of Tonsonet Air Base. And all the white level underneath the Saigon inscription there, that's all Tonsonet Air Base. And so just pointing this out, there's the main gate of Tonsonet. Here's Grenade Alley right here. Oh, okay, good. Main gate, Grenade Alley through here. Here's that VOQ with the rice going down here. As we get into the rest of the presentation, it turned out that that after we changed VOQs twice, we wound up in this one right here, which we called the Flint. It was a new building built by the Army, and some of us got housed down there. It was a 3-story building, 2 guys to a bunk room, and it was pretty Spartan stuff, but it worked fine. So that was that. As we were all in this area up here in different buildings, we moved into this fancy new building they built for the Combined Intelligence Center, which was right across from the biggest hospital that we had in Vietnam, the 3rd Field Hospital here. And right up in this area, just off the map, was actually Army of Vietnam Headquarters. And I'll show you a couple of slides that show you what that looks like too. But oh yeah, here we are. There's some F-4s, as you guys know. There's a squadron that looks like taking off at Tonsonet. And here's the Army of Vietnam Headquarters. And here we are in the brand new building. Let's get on with that, but let's talk about the Combined Intelligence Center to start with. It was the creation of General Westmoreland's J2 named Joseph McChristian. He was a major general. And he wanted to have this intelligence group to support both the U.S. and the Vietnamese combat units. And I've got some materials here that say that it was a big deal to combine all this information that kept coming in all over the country and trying to assimilate it and make it into something useful for everybody else. And his idea was to build this facility and staff it with enough people to provide timely intelligence to the combat units. That's what it was for. It was staffed by all 4 branches of the service, not including the Coast Guard, but and there were some Vietnamese assigned to it, particularly translators. We all carried top secret clearances out of Fort Holabird. That's just the way it worked in those days. And we got there to find out that because of the Vietnamese, it was only secret at the Combined Intelligence Center. Because they didn't want the Vietnamese to know anything above secret.
How did that implicate your operation? Only having...
Basically, most of us didn't know what really was going on. We were highly trained intelligence officers that had been taught that you didn't impart intelligence to each other without a need to know. and we palled around, we bunked with each other and everything else, and nobody really talked about what they knew. I mean, that was just part of the culture in the early days. That's what we were supposed to do, and we did it. In any case, when we moved into this building, SICV had about 500 people. Over the next year, it grew to 1,000 people before I left. It was a big, steep growth period. Big one. somehow I got assigned to the admin section to start with, and that was being brought up on a farm and sort of mentally preparing myself to be in the field with a combat unit. It was really disappointing to get assigned to MACV. Although I was married and I didn't think I ought to bitch about it too much. And, but I was really afraid of pushing paper the whole year I was in Vietnam. And most of the order of battle analysts, that's what they got to do. I got assigned to the admin, one of 10 sections at MACV. First thing I did was build a TO&E. You all know what that is, a table of organization and equipment for the organization as it moved into that building. And then the supply officer slot was offered to me, and I said, yeah, I think I'd like to have a Jeep of my own and a couple other vehicles, and yeah, I think I'd like to have something I could sort of be responsible for, and that sort of got me out of the intelligence business and probably busier than I've ever been in my life since. But that's what I did. I was the supply officer for the MACV organization. The first thing I had to do was sign for about $500,000 in those days worth of really expensive equipment for all the different stuff that we did. And we had an order of battle section, we had a strategic analysis section, we had an interrogation section, we had a target acquisition section. We did plot the B-52 strikes there when I was there. And every now and then I heard a little bit about all the North Vietnamese regulars that we were bombing. But that was just sort of hush-hush. Well, the North Vietnamese are coming down through Cambodia and into I-Corps and da-da-da-da-da-da and all that stuff. So in any case, it was, I had to sign for all that equipment, plus 3 vehicles. Eventually, I was responsible for the building, the new building. So that was it. Getting taken off that signature was sort of a big job at the end when it was time to go home, but that's another story. The thing to do was the biggest part of our job was to provision this growing organization as well as we could. And we drew from, will that go forward now? All right. This was the sign on my supply operation door, which was General McChristian's favorite, timely intelligence to the individual fighting man. I cannot comment on how well this organization did it. I can tell you that it grew and grew and grew, and if you Google the Combined Intelligence Vietnam organization from 1966, you'll find that it was the first of 5 combined intelligence organizations that they did. They split off interrogation and they split off 2 or 3 other divisions of intelligence into different operations. This one was the original one, and I can't comment on how well we did in 66 and 67 with timely intelligence, because it always seemed like a huge bureaucracy to me that just always needed more supplies. Mike knows this. He was an S4. And so that was that. I don't know if that looks like me or not, but there I am. This is the Saigon River, and here comes a blue water ship upriver to the Saigon docks, but because of Saigon River, they couldn't take the really big ships. And so we had to rebuild a whole Deepwater Port in Cameron Bay, which is what we did. When I needed supplies, the ships were stacked up either off the Saigon River or off Cameron Bay for as much as 30 days. It was in the news and all the stuff that you just couldn't get the ships unloaded. We were trying to build up in Vietnam, and there wasn't enough dock space. In any case, getting supplies was our number one job. We had to work hard at it. It was 7 days a week, probably 12, 14-hour days every day. We had a 3/4 ton truck and a deuce and a half, and they were on the run all day, every day, 7 days a week, trying to scrounge stuff all over the 3-Corps area, which is the Saigon area, pulling from a number of different depots.
I have a question.
Yes,
You went over as a second lieutenant.
I went over as second lieutenant.
Did you get a grade increase?
Yeah, I became a first lieutenant in December and went in September.
With the expanded responsibility you got? More money?
No, they didn't care about that. My time in grade,
The government hasn't changed that.
my time in grade,
Well, first lieutenant earned a little more.
About
$9. Yeah, well, yeah. It didn't make, my wife would tell you that it didn't make any difference in our lives. She still had to go to work as a school teacher in Jacksonville so that we could in Jacksonville, Florida. But in any case, good question. Well, let's not get to that one quite yet.
Was this a period when Saigon was experiencing a bunch of bombings and things?
Oh yeah, all the time, and I'm about to talk about that. But war in Northwest Saigon is, we deployed those trucks with 2 men in them all the time, and when we were off duty, you couldn't carry firearms in Saigon. Westy didn't like that. He wanted to have everything under control, so we weren't supposed to carry firearms in Saigon. Gave the wrong impression to the Vietnamese. When we were deploying those trucks, the driver carried a .45 and a guard was sitting right beside him with an M14. They were locked and loaded all the time. And so what was war like for me? Not a lot of it compared to some of you, but here's what I remember happening, and this came out of my letters home. December 4th, 1966, Christmas, I just become a first lieutenant. BC sappers raided Tonsonet Air Base, and the Vietnamese Air Police killed 19 of them. A month later, on January 10th, 67, the 519th MI Battalion, which was my morning report organization. They were the ones keeping track of all of us intelligence officers, but we were assigned to MACV Headquarters at the Combined Intelligence Center. The motor pool for our 3 vehicles was in the 519th Military Intelligence Battalion. They lost 3 vehicles on January 10th to ambush. Not mine, but on February 11th, the VC mortared Tonsonet again. No casualties. But let me just go back to this map for a second, just show you this. I told you that this was our BOQ. I told you that this was the main gate of Tonsonet. I used to drive in my own Jeep in the back gate of Tonsonet right here, and then across the airbase, all on dirt, on gravel roads, and then come over here to CICV. In any case, the February attack, I had just come in the back gate, and it went on for about 2 hours, and I just got out of my Jeep and went about 20 yards away and spent 2 hours in a ditch that was not a dry ditch. And so I'm just telling you what my war was like, but that was it for that. The other thing that we got into was, lost my place a little bit. Come here, baby. Continuing, on May 13th, 67, the VC rocketed Tonson again, killed 6 of our guys in their barracks on Tonson Air Base. In June of 67, our 3/4 ton truck was grenaded in heavy traffic. As you can see right in front of the tire, there's a big hole in the bed of that truck, and it shredded the canopy. If you look here, you can see the holes that the shrapnel made in the side of the truck. If you look there, there's the hole in the bed of the truck again. And if you look carefully down in the sunshine part of the tire, it soaked up a lot of shrapnel. And both the driver and the guard were uninjured. They were saved by the spare tire, which 2 of the specialist fours had suggested we chain to the headboards of our trucks the week before. Specialist fours, Murphy and Mullen, survived that grenading, and they gave us a new truck. But so that's kind of it. I've got 3 or 4 anecdotes I'd like to share with you. Before we get into those, anybody got any more questions about what it was like there?
One of the questions I have, I get confused when I get on the internet and I look at these orders of battle,
Mm-hmm.
and it seems to be it's like a description of the units.
That's right.
That so is that more of a like they send an infantry brigade and then all the support units, and then they issue an order of battle of who's on top, who's on the bottom, and who does what? Is that basically what an order of battle?
Let me tell you what I knew from my 1965 training, which is probably completely different today. All the training for in those days all anticipated some kind of a Russian encounter in Eastern Europe and some kind of an understanding of how a big army like the Russians would field would be organized, and all the order of battle training we got at Fort Holabird sort of anticipated that stuff. And we kept asking questions about, well, what about the VC in Vietnam? Well, they're organized a little differently. We don't know how their squads and their platoons and their companies and their brigades go together. Okay, so what about the North Vietnamese Army? Well, we know a little more about that, except that we don't have much information on it, and so they're trying to make sense out of it the way the intelligence world, the Army intelligence world in those days, would have made sense out of an encounter with the Russians. And so my training can't really answer your question very well, but we attempted to try and build the opposing enemy organizations at the Combined Intelligence Center, and my bunkmate was assigned to the order of battle.
So when we see that with the different units and the attached units and everything,
Mm-hmm.
it's just basically a description of who was there and the objectives and things of that nature.
Well, yeah, you are trying to give the CEO of whatever combat unit it is, if you're an intelligence officer, you're trying to give him some kind of impression of what's opposing him. That's all our order of battle is. what are we trying to fight against here? Well, it's tough because it was a guerrilla war. And there wasn't a lot of information that went together very well. But we got pretty good at it by 68, 69, and 70. If Congress had continued to fund the war, we probably would have done better, in my opinion. But,
Well, I think the early on challenge was the opposing force in the early 60s were essentially Viet Cong units, smaller units that had been infiltrated back into Vietnam.
sure, and they'd
So
been,
the structure was a lot more nebulous. After a period of time, those units started being decimated
yeah,
by both us and the South Vietnamese. So then you started seeing a lot more North Vietnamese units. And there you started seeing more conventional organization and structure. So when I was in the 25th Infantry, we're responsible for a certain area. And you're trying to protect it so the villagers and all that can go about their lives and be supported by the government. So you need to know who the enemy is, where it is. If you know that from working on an order of battle and capturing people, that there's a brigade-size unit there from a North Vietnamese, then you also know they're going to have a headquarters area, they're going to have logistics support areas, and you then can start analyzing your area and saying, okay, where do you think their headquarters, command and control is going to be in this area? And so then you target your action against those areas. So knowing kind of the order of battle, who your enemy is, the size of them, what type of, whatever you can learn from captured people, it gives you then an opportunity to figure out how you're going to counter them. And that's kind of the critical role you guys were trying
Yeah.
to figure out how to do.
and unfortunately, I had to hustle supplies, so I wasn't very expert in the application of my order of battle training. Although the taxpayers spent a lot of money training me how to do that, I never used it.
And I think the other challenge for us early on is we still very much had a perception or thinking of conventional war and the whole structure in Europe type thing.
Yeah,
And this is a whole new, different kind of
it
environment.
was completely different.
We're unwilling to really talk and share stuff with the South Vietnamese. You can be certain they weren't necessarily sharing everything they knew with us. And I think early on we tended to look down upon the South Vietnamese quite a bit, I think through most of the war. And they're a lot more capable, I think, than we ever gave them credit for.
Well, they were, and of course, all the way back to post-World War II, let's see, post-World War II, including Dien Bien Phu and the French, and where the French got surrounded by the North Vietnamese and all that stuff, that whole structure to the Viet Cong organization all the way down through South Vietnam from Hanoi, that had been intact for 20 or 30 years. And those warrens of underground havens that they all knew about, I mean, we finally found out about them and cleaned them out in a lot of cases. Mike was involved in a lot of that, and but that was all going on. It was a confusing time.
Must have been a wild time for you. I mean, very little guidance, in
Yeah.
terms of what you could do or how to put together an organization and where to find the materials. And
Yeah. That was a good graduate school for me, is what I've always said, Mike. I didn't go to business school, but doing what I did in Vietnam worked for me pretty well. It was a real positive in my life. But
I have another question.
yes,
I remember quite well, 67, hearing news reports about 50 North Vietnamese jets being shot down in one day and 75 in another day. And I wondered where all that information came from.
They pulled it out of somewhere.
That's what I'm wondering, that the intelligence, did that come from your operation in Vietnam?
no.
It came from
The answer is no. But MACV Headquarters put out a lot of body count information, a lot of captured document information, a lot of enemy aircraft blown up, usually on the ground information. Yeah.
Seemed like they had a massive Air Force that nobody knew about with the numbers.
That's, MACV Headquarters put that out, not part of our operation at all.
But that would have been reported by the operational branch, the Air Force themselves.
Seemed to be just a tad inflated.
A tad is an understatement
I mean, facetious sense.
in my experience.
Just a question, I was wondering.
Yeah. Let's see, I just timed out again. There it is. Okay, here we go. All right. That's a picture I took coming in the south gate of Tonsonet one morning. That's an F4 that didn't make it back. It crashed for some reason. I never found out why.
We're looking
That smoke.
at the smoke.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here was an Army major that I worked for. He was my CO for about 3/4 of my tour in Vietnam. His name was Wiley Watson. He was a Citadel graduate, and he stayed in military intelligence for his entire career. We got in touch again about 5 years ago, and we're in touch on a monthly basis still. There's my Air Force E8. He could play on anybody's team. I'm sure he made E9 right after that. He was that kind of a guy. He was a special human being, and he made a lot of things work. That shows him smoking a cigar. He actually took really good care of himself. Somebody gave us a couple of cigars, and I guess he was puffing on one of them. But he was a really good soldier, and most of his experience had been in Edwards Air Force Base, and he was great. Here's a Commander Woodleaf who replaced Major Watson as our CO, and he was a good guy the last 4 months I was there. And here's Sergeant Jackson, and probably our best man among our 5-man E4 crew, a guy named Powell. Sergeant Jackson was a master sergeant. Sergeant Eckhart had been a senior master sergeant, and he probably made chief, as I said after. But in any case, that's who I served with. And that's me within a month of going home with palm trees in the background that looks like I must be down at Vung Tau, but I wasn't. I was on top of the building right off the edge of Tonsonet Air Base at the Flint BOQ. But that's kind of it. And let me tell you a couple of things that I dug out of the few materials I have here that might amuse you. Stars and Stripes, on December 1st, (1966), has a story about Ensign Roger Staubach as a supply officer in Da Nang and I Corps after his Naval Academy football career and his appearance in the 1964 Cotton Bowl with the U.S. Navy. And just to show you where it is, everybody knows he went on to become, come here, baby. This is 48 years old. There he is right there in the corner. Same job I had up in Da Nang. I played a little football at Colorado College, but nothing like him. No, it was not a single wing at Colorado College. We played a split team, but mostly I played baseball at Colorado College. I played a year of football because the baseball coach was also the football coach down there. But in any case, oh yeah, here's one. February '67, General McChrystal appeared in the Sickbee supply area unannounced, all alone, no staff. And he found me helping the boys unload one of our trucks, shirt off and all. I showed him around. He told me, "It looks like you've got a good operation, Lieutenant. we all knew he only commented when he was pleased.
So you weren't scared or anything when he suddenly showed up, or wondering what he was doing?
I was a reserve officer, Mike. I wasn't scared about him much. You know, I don't know what I would have turned out to be if I was in a combat unit, because I enjoyed my soldiering experience mostly. And in any case, here's one you might like. April 18th, 1967, sat next to an Air Force captain on the plane on the way back to Saigon from R&R. He pitched for the University of Cincinnati when Sandy Koufax also pitched there. He said nobody could hit Koufax in college. On June 14th, 1967, dinner at the apartment in downtown Saigon of a Sharon, Connecticut neighbor and her husband. He was a UPI correspondent and had just returned that day from covering a Marine Corps action in I Corps. He was really mad and told us that a reporter named Dan Rather had gotten too aggressive and into the wrong place, so the Marine action had to mount a diversion to rescue him. That's right. That's right. So I guess that's basically what I prepared. Yes?
Did you get out into Saigon at all, or were you too busy, or you didn't care to?
Saigon's a beautiful city. The answer is only a little bit. As I think I said, it was tough not to keep your nose to the grindstone, because there's always going to be a string of lieutenant colonels that wanted something, and you better get it for them, or they're going to find somebody else to do it. And I took less than, you can't count the days off I took over there on two hands. You probably can count them on one hand. But so we didn't get around Saigon a lot. We did go down into the Chinese district called Cholan. It's on that map. For when we really wanted something different, we'd buzz down there and get some really good Chinese food, and it was really good. And then we started getting some restaurant bombings down there, and that sort of slowed us down a little bit. We still went down there, but we did that. There were a number of beautiful structures and buildings and everything in Saigon that the French had built. And you know, the city's laid out with wide boulevards and median strips and all that type of thing. It didn't look much different in the nice parts. It was always teeming with 2- and 3-wheeled vehicles, much more plentiful than 4-wheeled ones. And but there's some nice parts of Saigon, and it's a beautiful city in a lot of ways.
Did you go to the zoo there?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Quite a zoo.
Yeah, it is. You've been back there?
I had one day in Saigon. I was up in the north, way north, Icor.
Okay, yeah. You and Roger.
And somehow, some way, an old family friend, next door neighbor,
Okay.
through my mother, knew I was in Vietnam. He was in Saigon in military intelligence, and I can't remember his rank. He was either, his name was Graham. He was either a full colonel or
Oh, okay.
brigadier general. And he arranged for me to come down to spend a day
Cool.
with him. And I remember getting off the plane there. I still had all my web gear and my weapon and everything with me, but it was the most disappointing day of my life in Vietnam, because he put me up, I think, in a Hilton hotel. And I was so excited about using the toilet. And I went in my room and went in the bathroom, and there was a hole with 2 concrete pads. And I think that's probably the most traumatic mental thing that I ever went through. I mean, I wanted to sit and read the newspaper on the toilet.
Well, these BOQs I lived in didn't have any china in them. They were just holes.
I just thought a nice hotel would be really nice. So he took me to the zoo, and I was there just for maybe 18 hours.
Yeah. Huh.
Well, how was it for Ann when your wife, when you were gone? How did you communicate? And
The
how was
family-
coming back?
Well, we wrote each other about 2 or 3 times a week. And, we'd never opened the box those letters were in until a month ago, Mike. And now I read all of mine because I needed to know what I told her. I haven't read all of hers yet. I've got to go home and get on that. She's read most of mine. But what she did, we got married 2 weeks after I got commissioned and graduated. And she never finished Colorado College, and she went back to Jacksonville University to start with. And about 3 weeks into it, she was really frustrated because they wouldn't accept hardly any of her Colorado College credits where she'd been for 2 years. And all of a sudden she got some 8th grade teacher in the Palm Valley, right outside of Ponte Vedra Beach, if you know where that is, south of Jacksonville. The Palm Valley Elementary School lost their 8th grade teacher to some kind of one of these things that teachers get fired for doing the wrong thing with his kids or something like that. And everybody knew that Ann Bryant Hart's husband was in Vietnam. They asked her if she'd take over the 8th grade, and she did a good job. And she taught those kids the rest of the year, and lots of her letters complain about what a bitch it was to teach 8th grade kids in Palm Valley, Florida. But yeah.
Well, then when you came back, where did you deprocess that? How did you fly back in?
I got out of the Army in Oakland. We flew into Travis again, and it was late in the day. We had the afternoon to process, but I was released from active duty in Oakland at the Oakland Army Terminal, and I think we spent a night in San Francisco and got an early plane to the East Coast. I flew into where did I fly in? I flew into JFK and hopped up to Rome, New York, just outside of Utica. And Ann met me. We went up to our old family summer home, which is in the southern Adirondacks, about an hour and a half south of Lake Placid.
Were you in uniform when you flew back
Yes.
to New York?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. We wore khakis. That was, for me, that was khakis for the first time in a year. But I still had a set.
Did you encounter any hostilities?
No, but I can tell you this. My youngest sister got married about 3 months later, and her husband had gone to Yale, and all the groomsmen were draft dodging Yaleys. He himself had joined the Coast Guard, and as young marrieds they went off, and he became an admiral's aide in Miami after he went through his Coast Guard training. But I sort of successfully hid the getaway car in that wedding, and the groomsmen were really mad at me. And they decided they were going to take me on because I wouldn't tell them where the car was. And that wasn't very successful on their part. I ended up telling them where the car was a little while later, but they were really tough to take because They had no intention of going to the military. They would have gone to Canada before they went in the military.
Yale was where the SDS was.
That's right. Yeah, and look what's happened there in the last 2 weeks.
Yep.
I mean, after the University of Missouri, Yale didn't want to get left out, so they had one too, right? My son's went to graduate school at Yale, but
Any other questions and stuff? Thank you. Well, Gus, well, thank you very much.
well, nice being here. Thank you all for listening to it.
Oh, and just we want to thank you. So here's one of our challenge coins for the museum.
Well, isn't that nice? You know, I've got a whole bunch of guys I play golf with that are going to really hate me putting that down on the green, but I'll do it to mark a ball.
Well, thank
you,
again.
Mike. Thanks for talking me into
Thank you.
this. I
And
mean,
please stick around, everyone. Talk some more. And,
if you want to see any of these old materials, they go back to '66. But
use some other stuff here too, and certainly in our Vietnam.
Yeah.
There's a lot.